Hello, everybody, and welcome to Succeeding at Job Interviews and Performance Appraisals. My name is Swapnil Kamat. We have the beautiful Arunima Kamat with us. Hi, Arunima.
Hi, Swapnil.
We're actually shooting a class like this after a very, very, very long time. So both of us are, at least I'm excited. I don't know about you, Arunima. Arunima, are
So
you
am
excited?
I. Yeah, I
Uh,
miss this.
yeah, we were doing it so often, like almost every day, and now that we've shot most of the classes, this one of we have just about 2 or 3 remaining that we're going to shoot now. Anyway, this is an interesting topic, isn't it, Arunima? Succeeding at job interviews and performance
Yes.
appraisals, right? Both, I think both of these things are pretty important to a person's career, right? You need to get a job first, so you need to do the job interview well, and then you need to do your performance appraisals well, right? Because I know, Arunima, from my like literally, I have now almost 10 years of experience as a CEO
Mhm.
of doing performance appraisals and both job interviews, right? I've done both, but but I'd like to talk about performance appraisals for a minute.
Mhm.
I've literally 10 years of experience doing it. So I have done performance appraisals with quite a lot of people over all these years, right? And in all these years, I can literally think of one person in our office that I used to appraise myself
Mhm.
who would do a good job with that appraisal, right? On the other side, being on
Mhm.
the receiving side of it, literally just one person, and that person is Pooja Kamat, by the way, right? So she would do it extremely well. Pooja Kamat is not related to us, but she was one of the first kind of core members of Work Better who shared our surname. But she was literally the only person that would do it well, right? So besides
Right.
that, there was absolutely no one that would do it well, and that itself speaks for the reason why a class like this is so important, because if you know how to do that well, that has a direct impact on your if you know how to do your job appraisals well, it has a direct impact on the amount of money that you would make, because your raise would a lot of times depend on that, the kind of job profile responsibility that you get if you want shifts in your career. A lot of it depends on performance appraisal, and of course job interviews are super important as well, right? Because if you don't get the job, you have no opportunity to really perform. So this topic, very, very, very important, like all the topics on the communication coaching program. So let's get started. So we're going to start with, yeah, you have something to say, as I
Yeah.
see.
Yes. Yes. In
Yes.
fact, though I thought I was performing well, and I thought I did performance appraisals well. When I was building this content, I realized that even I don't think I did a good job
Yeah.
at the three appraisals that have happened so far for me. So
Yeah.
there's eye-opening even for me, and I think there is a lot for me to do better.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I had that realization myself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And also, this is something that I keep discussing, that we tend to read up and research as human beings on so many different issues, right? Especially when we're on social media, we'll research on vaccines, we'll research on just so many different things, but we often don't research and study things that are most important to us,
Correct.
right? And something like how to do a job interview well, how to do a performance appraisal well. These are core issues in our lives, right? But unfortunately we don't do anything about it. The vaccine, for
Correct.
most of us, we can play no part in it, right? When it comes, it comes. What do we do about it, right? But this is something which is almost directly in our control. We can learn about this,
Correct.
we can get better, and it can definitely change some outcome in our lives. But we have a huge habit of spending our time on stuff which is fairly useless, right? So let's start
Right.
with performance appraisals, and then we'll move on to job interviews. Arunima has gone into hiding. What is a performance appraisal, right? Traditionally, a performance appraisal was an evaluation of an employee's performance by his or her manager. In modern times, it has evolved into being a discussion for an employee's overall growth and development in the company, right? So this is a kind of a big difference between how it used to happen in the past and how it happens right now. Okay, and performance appraisals are taken very, very, very seriously now across the board, whether it's a medium-sized company or a large-sized company. It's a very important part of for both the company and for the people within it, right? Um, it it aims to review, develop, or revise position, standards, goals, and clarify the organization's expectations for an employee, right? So, like I said, both parties have it's something which is very, very important for both our parties, right? So, right off the top, very, very quickly, why are performance appraisals important for professionals? Pause the video here, quickly make a note of probably 3 to 4 answers that come to your mind in terms of why it's so important. Okay, now why are performance appraisals so important? You can identify potential discrepancies between you and your manager. Cut. Okay, you and your manager's perception of your performance. You will understand your KPIs clearly, your key performance indicators clearly. It will serve as a foundation for a promotion and a salary rise, and you will understand your contribution in the organization's overall growth. So if a performance appraisal is done well, this is why it, even if it's not done well, but this is why it is important, right? For you to do it. A lot of organizations have some sort of an appraisal possibly every 6 years. Some of them have it every quarter. I think a quarter is too much, right? But a mid-year appraisal is something which is very good, because that gives people, we haven't introduced that at Work Better yet, or did we? In some format we did have a mid-year performance review, right? But that's very, very important, because very often in your day-to-day operations, the manager and his team, they don't get time to really sit down and give exchange feedback on what's happening, and see how far away you're from your goals, etc., right? So that is something which becomes very important. Okay, now if you want to get a good performance appraisal, we, in a way, we've divided this. Before I come to this slide, right, we've divided this content into two parts. So let me use this slide to show it, right? So we've divided into two parts where we said, okay, if you want to get a good performance appraisal, PA, let's just call it PA here, right? What do you need to do through the year, right? What do you need to do through the year? And there are lots of things. We've just identified 3 points for you as the three most important ways of thinking and doing. And then what do you need to do at the time of the performance appraisal itself? And this we've broken up into before the performance appraisal, during the performance appraisal, and after the performance appraisal, right? But here, when we mean before, we mean, right, how do you prepare for the performance appraisal, right? So this would happen once a year or probably twice a year for you. So this part, how do you deal with that well? And then what do you do through the rest of the year if you want to get, if your performance appraisal needs to be good? So that's how we've divided this content, right? So what should you do through the year? Now, number one, this is something that I keep seeing a gap here in people, right? Know your performance parameters, deliver 120% of your key performance parameters consistently, be in the top 10 performers, right? Of your department. If the small organization of your organization, if the big organization, at least of your department, be amongst the top 10% of performers, meet 120% of your targets. Right now, I have over over a long period of time, and I'm just going to quickly um, add one blank slide here to explain a few things to you, and then we'll go back and forth between these two slides. Okay. Okay, now um, if you want to do well in your career, I've discussed this on multiple forums, right? I've discussed this, saying the most important thing that you need to focus on is getting results, right? So they doesn't matter what you're doing. You need to focus on getting results. Now, if you want to start getting results, so what does getting results mean, right? It means overachieving on your targets. That's one way of looking at it. Is you have very numeric targets, like there are in sales, lots of other profiles. There are very, very numeric targets that are there. So overachieving on those targets that have been set for you. And number two, it means being in the top 10% in your department, right? So that's where you need to find yourself in that top 10 of your department, top 10% of your department. And this means in a way that you're really getting results for your company. I don't know whether there are any other parameters. These are the two that comes to my mind right now. I've always mentioned that to do this, you need to put in the right effort. If you don't put in the right effort, what is called both smart plus hard work, right? This is, you're not going to get results if you don't put hard plus smart work. Now, to put in the right results, you need to constantly develop your KSA, right? You need to develop your knowledge, you need to develop your skills, and you need to develop your attitude, right? So you need to continuously work hard on developing your KSA. Once you do that, you tend to put in the right kind of effort, which is the right smart and hard work, which then gives you the results that you're looking at, right? And then once you bring these results, then you need to bring results consistently, right? So this is something that you need to master, which is, a lot of people can get results in 1 month, but you need to really focus on getting results consistently, right? And if you do this, you will be a star performer, right? You will be a star performer. um, and if you're a star performer, what tends to happen is you become kind of valuable to your company, and plus valuable to the marketplace, right? Because the marketplace, basically the market knows if you're somebody who's a performer more often than not, right? They know that you're somebody that's doing a good job through a little bit of calling, this, that, review, just the way you do your interview. They'd know that, right? Then you become valuable. And when you become valuable to your company, that's when you start making money, right? That's when you start making better money, better results. All those things happen as a result of that, right? So this is your basic chart of what you need to do, right? So therefore, if you want to get good, focus on the results. Now, what does this mean? Know your performance parameters. Now, I'm going to give you a more kind of simple example of this. I'm going to give you a sales example because it's the most easy for me to explain to you, right? Now, as you know, in sales, you have people that have a target, right? Let's assume that they have a sales target of 1,000 rupees in a year. And this is one parameter which is there, right? Now, if this is one parameter which is there, however, there are lots of other parameters as well which are a part of this, right? Which means there more often than not will be a payment collection parameter, right? Which means that, okay, you need to collect your payments within the 45 days after you've done your sale or whatever, if there is that, right? There could be a cross selling target or a cross-selling key result area that could be there, right? Then there could be a key result area in terms of margins that are there, right? This could be your how much sales you actually do, but what margins are you doing at, so on and so forth, right? So if you are a smart salesperson, or if you're a smart executive, what you will do is you will not just concentrate on the rupees 1,000, but you will concentrate on each one of the other parameters as well and try to excel on each one of these parameters. That's what you'll keep in mind, because the minute you excel on each one of these parameters, your company doesn't have a choice but to give you a great appraisal at the end of the year, right? Because you have data to show them. Now, my experience tells me that what people tend to do is, the average performers, it's better than not doing anything, but they just focus on this one thing, which is, "Arey, mera target 1,000 hai, so I'm just going to focus on that," and they just focus on this particular 1,000 thing. They don't concentrate on any other parameter, and then they in a way lose out to the people that have not just achieved the 1,000, but they've achieved all the other parameters as well. And then those people tend to get much better appraisals than that. Now, it's much better to achieve the 1,000 than not achieve the 1,000, right? So no doubt about that. But if you want to really get a good appraisal, you need to be able to go and say, "Hey, you know what? I have performed or overperformed on each one of the parameters which have been set out for me. It's not just been on one or two parameters. It's on every parameter that I'm doing well," right? And that's when you tend to get a good appraisal. Okay. Yes, Arunima Kamat.
Yeah, I have two questions.
Yeah.
One is, so you've given examples of what performance parameters are,
Yeah.
but how can a professional go about actually understanding the performance parameters? Are you supposed to talk to your manager? how do you actually know that these are the 10 things or these are my 10 performance parameters? Because we're often clear on the major, like what your role is. So for a
Yeah.
salesperson, you know, this is your target.
Yeah.
How do you actually go about to identify those other 6 or 7 parameters that you may have?
Correct. So
Um,
in most, it's a good question, Arunima, but in most like decently sized organizations, right?
mhm.
Those parameters will be pretty clear for you,
Okay.
right? So those parameters will be laid out. Or let me put it in this way: most organizations that would do performance reviews, that would have this actual
Mhm.
system of doing performance reviews, means
Mhm.
that it's reached a certain level of professionalism in that
Got
company,
it.
right?
Hmm.
And if they've reached that level of professionalism, I'm assuming that they would have certain KPIs, which are key performance indicators, that
Correct.
would be there, which would be fairly laid out for people.
Mhm.
If it's not, if it's not laid out in a very formal way to you, the only thing that you can do as a professional is to really ask your boss, saying, okay, you have given me this as a target, but are there any other parameters that you're really judging me on, right?
Correct.
What are those parameters which are there? And again, what could come out, even if it's not formally laid out, is I gave you kind of all the parameters connected to one thing of sales, but the other things could be, how are you dealing with your colleagues across departments? And a lot of,
Mhm.
even more evolved companies, I wouldn't even call it evolved, because sometimes they complicate these things so much, right? They would have certain scores connected to that your teammates would give you,
Got
right?
it.
Right, so
Mhm.
that would be, it's not just getting off that particular number, or it's not just doing your job well, but how are you actually, dealing with some of your subordinates. A large
Correct.
consulting firm that we were dealing with, they would have something that they would call eminence building, right? So that
Mhm.
would be in their appraisal as well, which would be, okay, you're doing your job well, but how are you helping the brand of this XYZ company grow more?
Mhm.
What are you
Mhm.
doing for the brand to grow more? And what they wanted their
Got it.
people to do is, write articles, write columns, go and speak at different institutes, right? Put papers out. They wanted them to do all this kind of research and development work and actually put that stuff out, which would lead to their company becoming a bigger brand, because it was a consulting
Correct.
company,
Mhm.
right? So that was one of the parameters that was there. Now, in the four parameters that are there, if a person in that particular company only focused on his target, because each one of them would have a target as
Correct.
well, if they only focused on the target, did everything connected to that, overachieved on that particular target, but didn't do enough on the eminence building part, or didn't do enough, they had another
Mhm.
criteria around self development as well, right? That we want you to develop yourself. But if they didn't concentrate on that particular angle, or they didn't concentrate on another angle, you're doing yourself a disservice, right? Because again, at
Correct.
the end of the year, your superior could say, hey, you know what, you did well on your kind of target, your business target, but on each and every other parameter that is important to the company, you're not performing that well, right?
Correct.
And I know this for a fact, because people don't take this entire thing, I find it strange, but they just don't take it seriously, right? They
Mhm.
just don't take this particular process seriously. If I were an employee in a company, right, and especially a company like the company that I mentioned, which is, these are very large global giants, right?
Correct.
What I would do all day long is, through the year, I would sit with my performance appraisal form. That's it,
Correct.
right? I would have that like bang in front of me, saying, this is my form, this is what I'm going to be judged on at the end of the year. I want to get the best appraisal of everyone in this particular system, because it helps me
Right.
make more money, etc., etc. I'm going to have this in front of my face, and I'm going to tick off every damn box in this
Correct.
thing for me to do well. Not just tick off one box and then be in a situation where your boss or your leader or your super boss is taking your case, saying, भाई तू बस ये करता है पर और कोई पैरामीटर पे तेरा स्कोर नहीं है, right?
Correct.
Why would I do that to myself? Yeah, I just don't understand it, right? Yeah, and that's something which is important. And by the way, right, so I have made the same mistake myself.
Mhm.
um, but I can excuse myself, because it was literally my first year of ever working, right? So but I made a similar mistake as well. I didn't take the performance appraisal form that seriously. I didn't take a lot of those things that seriously, but I realized that pretty quickly that it's something that you need to and
Correct.
have to do, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, go on.
And I had another question,
Yeah,
which is regarding point number two. Um, you also mentioned that if you have a target, you should overachieve it. Now it's
yeah,
very easy when you have a numeric target. If you said that you need
yeah,
to get 1,000 rupees per month, and if
yeah,
I'm getting 1,200, I know that I'm overachieving.
yeah,
For people with non-numeric targets, how do
yeah.
they know that when they're overachieving, and how do they sort of draw that line for themselves?
Correct. It's very again a very good question to start with, right? Um, First of all, at any point of time, if you have a non-numeric target,
Mm-hmm.
as the person, as the employee or the subordinate to a leader, try to convert that in some way in a numeric target if there is,
Got it.
right? It's not always possible. It's not always possible, but try to convert it into a numeric target. Right now, I'll give you an
Hmm.
example of what I'm trying to say. Let's take our content team, right, at Work Better. These are people that
Correct.
actually make all the learning content connected to it. Now you guys don't have a numeric target, right? But data that you can go back with during an appraisal is possibly to say that, hey, these are the 20 clients that I worked on, and I went back and checked the feedback that the workshops got,
Correct.
right, on the content that I worked with. And I'm happy to tell you that each one of them got 4.5 on 5, right? So
Correct.
literally every project that I'm working on, I am getting that kind of a numeric feedback back. So it's converted into that. If there is, say, content that you're working out with, right? So you say, okay, we need to finish this much. Put a number to it. So we need to finish 20 content kits in 3 months,
Mm.
right? That is the target that I'm setting for myself. So even if your boss doesn't go about setting the target, you set the target in
Correct.
as numeric a way as possible and share it with your boss. So then you can tell him that, hey, this is the target that we decided, although you didn't give me, but we decided, and I'm overachieving on that target, right?
Right.
Or if you're underachieving for whatever reason, if something came in between or some other thing, at least you have some numeric parameter to do it. Again, I have to admit that it's not always possible to do that, right? Let's
Mm-hmm.
take the role of a personal assistant to somebody, right? There is no way a numeric target can be set saying that, hey, last year I took 100 calls, this year I'll take 120 calls, right? That doesn't make
Correct.
sense. What the boss is looking at is just your overall performance of what and how you're doing,
Yeah.
right? And there could be lots of other roles even within Work Better where we know that giving an absolute numeric target is just not possible. It would be stupid to just give it, right? My point is, where
Correct.
possible, the organization and boss should do it, and where possible, the subordinate or employee should give it a lot of thought if they can convert it into some kind of a
Mm-hmm.
numeric black and white kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's my answer.
Got it. Okay. And in situations where, like you said, there are some roles which you just cannot convert into numeric
Yeah.
target. Uh, I'm just trying to understand if there is a way for you to really determine if you are performing well or overperforming, even if you don't have a numeric target.
See, the thing is that, can you know whether you're performing? Okay, I wanna step back up for a minute, right? The It's not always possible, but
Mm-hmm.
the best jobs um, are the jobs where there are clear cut numeric targets. And by the best jobs, I mean the jobs where you will, like you said, have the maximum clarity on whether you're doing well or not, because there's a clear cut numeric target.
Correct.
However, literally the only place where those job exists are sales,
Sales.
right? That's literally the only part where that exists. Or if you're like a sales leader or a CEO, because you're still
Hmm.
dealing with number based. In
Numbers.
most other profiles, if you do an analysis, right, okay, let me give you another one where it's pretty clear cut. Recruiting,
Hmm.
right? Have you recruited or not, in a way? But even in recruitment, what tends to happen is there is a qualitative aspect to it, right? You can't, if you could hire a bunch of
Correct.
idiots just because you want to meet it, right? And it won't be considered that you've done that good a job. If it's a smaller organization, if it's a larger organization, you won't really know. But in recruitment, it's still pretty clear cut that, okay, have you hired, have you not hired, what is the number that you hired, right? Very, very, very clear
Correct.
cut. In a lot of other kind of back end roles, it is far more difficult to determine that, right? um
Correct.
in an absolute numeric, and it could be you could be an IT engineer, you could be an architect, you could be a lawyer to a certain extent. If you're working for a firm and you connect it to the hours of billing that you're doing, then you can make it a lot more numeric, right? So I mean, by best jobs, I mean the jobs where you can be clear cut in terms of whether your performance is good or not good. That's what I mean
Right.
by the
Right.
by the best roles there, right? That makes sense, right?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. What come to your
no,
question?
go
I
on.
just wanted to
Hmm.
give you this backdrop. What was your question specific? I've forgotten that.
S- So, for such jobs where it's
Yeah.
more qualitative as opposed to quantitative, how
Mm.
can you determine how do you get clarity on whether you're performing well or not?
I think the only way to do that is okay. If you're doing a lot of client interfacing work,
Hmm.
um, how happy your client is with you,
Right.
right? Difficult to determine, right? So you can't say what, how big is this smile. If there's some kind of rating parameter there that can help you, again, any kind of rating parameter makes it
Yep.
quantitative, right? Again, but for those roles, my only suggestion to people would be that try to interact with your boss on a regular basis to get
Correct.
a sense of whether you're doing well or not, right?
Correct.
And you
Correct.
need to be lucky also to have a boss that expresses whether you're doing well or not, right? Or
Hmm.
gives you that comfort for you to ask him or not. So there's lots of ifs and buts there. But there, my only suggestion would be like the more in touch you are with the person that is going to give your um
Feedback and
feedback, right? So that is better. The other, now that I'm thinking, right, yeah, actually, I've never thought of this before, Arunima, but uh, mistake minimization,
hmm.
right? So that's something which is very, very important for non kind of numeric targets. And what do I mean by mistake minimization? In a lot of these roles, if you keep making a lot of mistakes, the mistakes glare, right? The
Hmm.
mistakes hit you in the face.
Correct.
Or it could be kind of, the qualitative appreciation that you may get from somebody, right? Those would be the
Correct.
kind of parameters to really look at while doing it,
Yeah, makes
right?
sense. Makes sense.
Yeah, not a very good, I don't think it's a very good answer, but I don't know of a
I
better
think it's a
answer than
little
that.
tough, but
Yeah.
yeah, it gives me a little clarity.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So yeah. So first is focus on your performance parameters. Yeah. The second one, right? So through the year, what do you need to do, right? Take ownership and responsibility. So what does taking ownership and responsibility means? This is, by the way, this ownership and responsibility literally a separate class in itself, right? So we can't get into that much detail, but the one way in which I kind of describe ownership always is to say ownership. If you are taking ownership, basically you are taking a certain headache off your bosses or your customers' head off. That's what you're trying to do, right? You're taking a certain headache off their head, um, which basically means that taking ownership and responsibility means that if your boss gives you a certain job, a certain task, a certain project, the minute he gives it to you, in his head, he must get this feeling saying, I've given this task to this person will put heaven and earth together and get this task done in a quality fashion, right? He will get the job done exactly like it's supposed to be done. So that confidence, if your boss or customer has on you when he's giving you a certain task or project, that means you're the kind of person that takes ownership and responsibility, right? On the flip side, if your boss is giving you a certain task and at that point of time your boss itself is worried whether that task will happen or not, or he's sometimes hesitant to give you the task at all because he knows from past experience he'll have to give you the job and then he himself will have to do it later, because either you've displayed incompetence in the past, you've incompetence in terms of being lazy, not knowing your stuff, so on and so forth. But if that's the feeling that he gets at the back of his mind, saying, should I delegate this at all to this person, or should I just do it myself, that means you've not taken enough ownership and responsibility in your organization. And like I've said in the past, as a company, as a person, at each and every level, if you don't take ownership and responsibility, you can't succeed in your career, and in turn you're not going to get a good performance appraisal, right? If you don't do that, because your boss is very aware. If your boss has 10 people reporting into him, he knows through the years that which are the 3 or 4 people that are the kind of people that take the headache off his head, and which are the 6 to 7 people where when he delegates he needs to be worried about it, right? He knows that. And for this boss who has 10 people, these 3 people become very, very valuable for him, right? These 3 people become very, very valuable for him. He wants to retain these 3 people at all costs, and because he wants to retain these 3 people at all costs, they're likely to get the best performance appraisal, right? These 7 who are not that good and he has a headache, he is okay to lose these people, and therefore they may not get a good performance appraisal, right? So you want to find yourself in this category, right, where you take the headache off your boss's head. Now, if you want to take the headache off your boss's head, you need to have this mentality which I discussed, which is a start to finish mentality, right? And I'll quickly tell you what a start to finish mentality means. Start to finish, a lot of people are used to doing jobs 70 or 80%, right? And they just don't finish this last mile of the 10 to 20% last mile. They just don't finish it, because more often than not, they get the last mile to finish is fairly tough. They get busy with other stuff. Now, if you finish something 80%, right, and if you don't take it to the 100 mark, the 80% of time and effort that you put is literally, besides the learning that comes out of it, a waste of time, right? A waste of time. And my famous story to share here is a Diwali gift story that happened at work better 8 years back. A certain person had given him the project to send Diwali gifts to all our clients and all different important stakeholders. We want to do something special and send that. Yeah, so I keep saying, let's assume it's a 100-hour project. He would take 100 hours to finish it, right? He put in 70 to 80 hours in this, but by the time the 70 to 80 hours got over, he realized that now if he sends a Diwali gift, they're going to reach them one month late, right? So he more or less finished 80% of the job by putting 70 to 80 hours in it. But that last thing, the last mile, he couldn't complete because he wasn't very, very well organized. Now, this 70 hours of time that he put in is more or less a waste besides the learning that comes out of it, right? Okay. And if you keep operating like that, where you finish something, you take something to 80% and then you let it go and you don't really complete it, you're not going to be the kind of person that's going to be useful for your boss, right? So you need to be somebody that takes something from start to the end. You get things done, because when you take it to the end, that means you're getting results for your boss. The results lie here at the end. The results don't happen when you do something 80% in most cases, right? So that's what you want to focus on, right? So that's what the start to finish mentality means. And the third one is, of course, like I said, this is a huge topic. We're just covering some key points here. Think ahead, right? Taking ownership means that you think ahead. I'm going to quickly give you an example. Now, if your boss says here, oh, you know what, please book the conference room for a training program on 1st and 2nd Feb, right? This is what your boss says. He says, please book the conference room. That's all he says to you, right? Now, if you don't think ahead, you will just book the conference room for him. If you think ahead, what you're going to do is you're going to say, okay, I need to book a conference room for a training, as my boss told me. So what are all the other elements that are involved in typically a training program that I may have to figure out, right? So you may say, oh, you know what, my boss has asked me to put the training room, but maybe he will need a projector for this. So it's a training program, so maybe he's going to need notepads plus pens. Maybe he's going to need tea and lunch to be organized, right? Do we have a handle on who the trainer is that's going to come? Have we invited all the participants for this? Are you getting it? So all the other things connected to this job, although your boss hasn't mentioned it to your boss, just said organize the training room. You said, okay boss, do you want me to do all these other things as well, which are connected to that one thing, or who's done them, or do you want me to do them, right? So to check on all these parameters even before your boss has told you, or even before your boss has thought of it, right? So here you're really thinking ahead or for your boss, and that's what everybody likes, right? Every boss likes a subordinate that's going to make his workload easier for him, right? And of course there could be some rare bosses that say, why are you thinking ahead, you just do what you're supposed to do. And if you have a boss like that, it's that's time for you to get a transfer, that's time for you to kind of quit your job or do whatever. If you have a boss that says, why are you thinking, you don't think, you just do what I tell you, right? And that's a sure shot sign that you need to change your department or your job itself. But in most cases this is something that your boss will really appreciate, that you're not just thinking, that you're thinking ahead and making stuff easier for him, right? So yeah, so this is the whole thing on taking ownership and responsibility. Now treat your boss like your number one customer. I keep talking about this, right? More often than not, the problem, if you want to get a good performance appraisal, your good performance appraisal is largely dependent on your boss and to a certain extent on your super boss, right? So these are the two stakeholders that are literally going to decide your role, your raise, your responsibilities. They are going to be the people within that organization that decide how your journey within that organization is going to be, right? So make no mistake about it, a lot of us, for various reasons, and you should attend our kind of session on boss management, right? It's a very, very important, it's a very interesting session. We don't have it as a part of CCP, but we have it in another product of ours. But a lot of people are busy treating their boss like the enemy for various socio-cultural reasons that happens, right? You're treating your boss like the enemy, and because you're treating your boss like the enemy, because you're used to doing that, you don't end up building good relationships with him. There's work doesn't happen that well between you all, right? But you need to understand these are the two people that are most important, and between these two people, your immediate boss is somebody that's super important to you in terms of getting a good appraisal, right? So this boss is your number one customer. Keep that in mind, right? This is your number one customer, and your job is to, like with all customers, you need to delight your customer, right? You need to delight your customer. Now I'm going to give you a quick customer service reference, and then I'm going to come back. Okay, let's clear this. Okay, now I'm going to quickly clear this side. Okay, so in any kind of customer service, we say that whether a customer is satisfied, dissatisfied, or delighted depends on his expectations. Okay, so that's the key. So now think of this thing in terms of your boss, right? Your boss's expectations. If you just about meet your boss's expectations, your boss is going to be satisfied with you. If you don't even meet his expectations, you're going to be he's going to be dissatisfied with you. And if you go above and beyond his expectations, he's going to be delighted. And when he's delighted by you, that's your best chance of getting a great performance appraisal, right? That's your best chance of getting that grade. So a so this is what it is. It all depends on your boss's expectations of you, right? Now how will your boss's expectations of you are going to get formed in different ways, right? A lot of times they are formed on his past subordinates doing the same role as you are doing right now, right? So these past subordinates that used to report into him used to do certain things as per his expectation. Now if you are barely meeting those expectations, he'll be satisfied with you. If you're not even meeting those expectations which have come from his past subordinate, now you can say, oh, that shouldn't be the way it is. Deal with life not the way you'd like it, but like the way life is, right? So it's very natural for his expectations to get formed based on the past people that have done that job. for him, right? So if you're not even going to meet them dissatisfied, if you're going to go above and beyond that, right? But your job from today onwards is to say, hey, my what I need to do is I need to delight my boss, right? I need to make him super happy with me. I can't be embarrassed about this goal of mine of wanting to delight my boss. A lot of people are embarrassed about it, right? So they'll say, yeah, why should I do that? That's stupid. He's going to decide how much money you make. He's going to decide what your role is going to be. Don't be embarrassed about it. Be very proud and say, that's what I'm going to do. That's my number one job. I'm going to delight him, right? And the only way to kind of delight him is to understand their expectations, preferences, and work accordingly, right? How is it that they want to do a certain thing? So really focus on understanding their expectations, preferences, and work accordingly. And of course, in the end, be somebody that is reliable and stick to your commitments, right? Because if you're going to deal with any customer, right, and especially your boss, if you're going to deal with any customer and especially your boss, you need to build a reputation of being somebody that's reliable. And in the workplace, the only measure of being reliable is you sticking to your commitments, right? That is the only measure in which people start trusting you, people start thinking that you're a reliable person. You need to stick to your commitments in terms of the time that you give somebody on every parameter, right? This is my tat on this is when I'm going to deliver this, and stick to that. And you need to stick to your commitments in terms of the quality that you provide, right? Because everybody is expecting a written or unwritten, a said or unsaid kind of quality parameter which is always there. You need to ensure that you're delivering on that commitment to your boss. And if you're doing both these things, then you're going to be reliable. And the minute you're reliable and trustworthy for your boss, and of course, the other parts of being reliable is not lying, something which is that simple, right? Not lying all the time to your boss connected to stuff. If you're lying here, he's definitely not going to trust you. If he's not going to trust you, he's unlikely to give you a good appraisal, right? So just these are the three things of many many things that you need to do through the year, in order for you to get a good appraisal. Each one of these three things are super important. I couldn't choose one versus the other because all of them are also interconnected to each other, right? So just to summarize, number one thing, focus on your performance parameters. 120% of what you need to deliver, try to do that, or be in the top 10% of people within your department, and know every performance parameter that is there, not just one or two parameters, right? And perform on all those parameters. Literally have, if you have your performance appraisal form, put it right in front of you. Take ownership and responsibility, which basically means taking the headache off your boss's head. And number three, treat your boss like he's your number one customer and go about delighting your boss. Don't get embarrassed about delighting your boss. That is your job. Your family depends on you, right? And if you're going to go about delighting all the other customers but not delighting your boss, you're being stupid, right? Your company may benefit from that, but you are definitely not going to benefit from that, right? So yeah, these are the three things. Arunima, do you have any questions connected to this?
No, no questions here.
Okay. Now, a quick exercise for you, right? So it's something that you need to reflect on, and of course, take these answers back to your coaching session. Reflect over your past performance appraisals, right? How did they go? Have they been positive experiences? How did you feel before the appraisals? How do you think you What do you think you did right during those, and what do you think you could have done better during those performance appraisals, right? So answer these questions of how you felt, right, after reflecting over them, and have a discussion on these answers with your coach, right? I think this one is especially important. How do you think you could have done better? What do you think you did right, right? You're paying for this thing, right? If you're paying for this thing, extract the most out of it. If this kind of a session can even help you a little bit in terms of getting, say, a 3 to 5% better raise, right, in the overall scheme of things, it's such a good return on investment if you can do that, right? So give this a lot of thought. Pause the session here, and take these answers then to your coach. Okay, now we're moving to the second part that we discussed, which is the actual performance appraisal, right? That meeting, what do you do there? And this, like I said, is first divided into what do you do before that meeting, what do you do during that meeting, and what do you do after that performance appraisal meeting, right? Now, what do you do before the performance appraisal meeting is do a monthly self evaluation on the parameters used during the performance review, right? So, this is something that you need to do yourself at all points of time. And like I said, if I were you, I would have had, if there's a certain form that is there for your performance appraisal, you could say, no, my form changes every year. This form changes every year by a little bit, right? If you have last year's form, or on which you were appraised, I would have that right in front of me so that I can do a monthly evaluation of myself, of how I'm doing on those performance reviews. Maintain a record of your self evaluation and performance, especially for important projects. Keep a track of accomplishments through the year instead of compiling them just before the appraisal, right? So that's again something which is very important. Keep a track of accomplishments throughout the year instead of compiling them right at the appraisal. Now, I'm going to go back to giving the example of Pooja Kamat, right? Somebody I was very, very fond of, somebody that was an excellent team member at work better, right? Now, why would she do her performance appraisals much better than other people? This slide in the sense is the simple reason why she would do it, right? Because she would literally take the effort. I don't know whether she'd literally keep it through the year, whether she'd keep all these records, or whether she would just accumulate them right before the performance appraisal. I don't know what her process was. But when she would come for the performance appraisal, she would be clear on exactly, she would mention and name all the projects that she had worked on during that year, right? Of saying, this is all the projects that I've done, this is the amount of content that I've created during this 1 year, these are all my accomplishments. So it would literally be the first 10 to 15 minutes of her just listing down facts, figures, data, statistics on her performance, both quantitative and qualitative, right? That's what she would do. And it would all, it's not something that she would just come up with last minute. It's something that would be written down right in front of her. She would put that down, and then she'd have all her data ready with you, and we would be like surprised. And what would tend to happen is that however hard you worked during the year, and we would know that a Puja Kamath would work very well, very smart and hard through the year. But when she would do this kind of a summary in front of us of all the things that she had done and achieved during the year, it would literally hit us hard, saying, oh wow, you have done so much work through the year. We knew through the year that you would do that work, but when you summarize that entire thing, it just hits you that much harder. And therefore any kind of critique that we would have for her, or any kind of areas of self improvement that we would have for us, sometimes even those things would take a back seat, because we're like, oh, you know what, we didn't, as your leaders, have a sense that so much of work was going on in your department, right? Or in your role, that so much of work was going on. And maybe that was the reason why you couldn't accomplish these two or three things that we had in mind, right? Now, if she didn't do that part well, the focus would be on those two or three areas that she hadn't done well. So she'd always say that these are all the things that I've done, and therefore these two or three things that I know are your expectations of me to do through the year, I haven't managed to do it because of this overload of work that has been there, right? And literally, as her bosses, we would have to just shut our mouth because it made complete sense what she was talking about. But it can never happen. The ideal way for of doing it is to do a monthly or periodic self evaluation, and especially keep a track of accomplishments through the year. Yeah, because a lot of times it's so difficult for you to do it at the end of the year. Of course, because of technology today, it's become a lot more easier, even if you have to do it right before your appraisal, right? And some of the smart people that don't do it monthly or periodically but just do it before that, what they do is they go check their calendar, right? They go check their Google calendar or their diary or whatever calendar system, and they go through all the work based on that calendar, and they use that as a reminder of all the things that they've done. right? And then they can list all those things down and then look, okay, that this particular project we did really well, and this is the kind of appreciation we got, and this project, this was the kind of score that we got, right? So again, even if you don't do it monthly, you can use your Google Calendar or your physical calendar to see all the work that you've done through the last year, and then kind of list it down during your appraisal, right? Arunima, you had come on screen.
Yeah. A side benefit of doing point number three, something that I often would do is when you have, of course, to do it on a monthly basis so that you don't have to sort of do it all together at the end.
Mm,
But like you said, you can choose to do that.
mm.
When you have your accomplishments sort of saved, what I would do is I create a folder on my email and I keep all the appreciation emails that I get there.
Yeah,
Like I said, a side benefit is sometimes when you want a little bit of a boost of confidence,
yeah,
you can go through that as well, and you feel
absolutely.
good about your performance. You feel good about the work that you're doing, and
Yeah,
it can also help you right before the appraisal that that these are all the things that I've done well. So you just
yeah,
personally get a boost as well. So I think
yeah,
that's
absolutely.
it's a bit of a tangent, but I think it's a great benefit of
Yeah,
doing something like this.
absolutely. Right. So decide how you want to do this, but in the end, you need to do this part, right? If you want to get it well. Revisit your last performance appraisal. That's the next point. Mark your progress towards the goals set during the last appraisal. For example, did you get the training you had planned to pursue? Did your performance metrics improve? Did you take a leadership role within the organization, right? If you didn't meet a certain goal, be ready to explain why it didn't happen, right? Again, very very good slide to look at what your past performance was, see what progress you made from that last performance like review that you had, and if you didn't have something to explain it, right? Now another kind of practice that you should keep in mind, right? So let's assume that your appraisal happened in FY19, right, at the end of FY19, and now you're at FY20 appraisal is what's happening, right? If some goals have been set out by the organization or your bosses that they want achieved during this 1 year, and there could be a lot of things that are kind of proactive goals that they want, right? By reactive I mean your day-to-day work, whatever that day-to-day work is that you need to do, and you're probably busy doing that because this is always more operational in nature. You don't have a task, you don't have a choice but to do this, but they could have set some proactive goals for you. And if you see that these proactive goals are not getting achieved, do not wait for the end of the year appraisal to bring this up saying, oh, but I couldn't do these proactive goals that were set in because of this reason, right? If you do that, it's your fault. Don't blame your boss, super boss, or the organization for not getting a good appraisal, right? If certain goals have been set in FY19 that you see are not, you're not being able to achieve them because of certain real problems at the workplace, right? It could be workload related, it could be that you had to fix a lot of things. I don't know what those things could be, but if there are those problems, your job is to bring them up periodically to your boss or super boss, right? Telling them that I know you had set these goals for us, but these are the reasons why we haven't been able to start or do these projects that you want us to do, right? These are the reasons. So you keep him in the loop of something that you had promised, but you can't do it. You can't just bring it up at the end of the year. You will get in trouble, right? Because the minute you do that and you keep your boss informed at the end of the year when he's looking at your past performance and saying, oh, this is what we had decided to do, but this didn't get done, it can't seem like, oh, now you're coming to me at the end of the year and you're telling me that this can't get done, right? Although we had discussed this at the start of the year that you're supposed to do it, you should have come to me before, right? And you want to totally avoid that by keeping your boss in the loop on those 2 or 3 things that can't get done. This is a very very important point if you want to nail your performance appraisals, right? Okay. See, prepare the answers in advance. If your company uses a self appraisal form, get a hold of it in advance. Identify your strengths and weaknesses. In what areas are you excelling in? In what areas do you still need to improve? List your goals for the next year. What do you want to achieve in the next year? What skills do you wish to develop? Are there any additional responsibilities you want to take? Are there any specific projects you want to work on right now? Oh God, years of talking to people about this subject, right? I get very excited about this subject. Okay. I have seen so many people that for some reason during their performance appraisal, they start feeling shy. right? And what do I mean by shy? Like literally they'll say stuff like, oh, but how can I write these things about myself? Man, you've been given a self appraisal form to write things about yourself. What did you do well? What did you not do well? What do you think your strengths are? What do you think your weaknesses are? Right? It is your job um, to write it down. I am not saying that you go about tom-tomming about yourself in your personal and professional lives, go about bragging about what your strengths are, what you did well to the world at large. But the one time that you are supposed to do that, both in writing and during the interview, is the performance appraisal time. Yeah, your career is dependent on it. And I've had so many people say that, oh, but how do I say that about myself, right? On the self appraisal form, sometimes there are ratings that are there, and I've known of people that have just kept it blank, saying that, hey, I'm supposed to do the self appraisal, but I've just kept it blank, boss. Whatever you think you should give me, just give it to me. Listen, that's a stupid way of doing it, right? If you're supposed to self appraise yourself, be realistic and self appraise yourself, right, on it. And then have the discussion. And that's not the time to feel shy about it. That's not the time to feel coy, or that's not the time to play humble, right? If there's a rating of 5 and you say, oh, I'll give myself only 3, if I give myself 4, I'll come across as arrogant, you're being stupid. If you think you've done a good job in your own eyes and as compared to other people in your department, please put it out there. That is the one time that you need to do it. And I've seen way too many people that don't do that, right? I have a very good friend who in my building, right? And he's probably 45, 48 years old, right? A very senior executive, somebody that's done very, very well. And we were talking about his appraisals once, and in spite of being somebody that's so well educated, somebody that's done relatively well at his job, he had some of the same views, saying that, oh, but how do I talk about my own achievements? I'm like, hey, the form is right there for you to talk about all your achievements and to elaborate on it. If you don't do it, then you're sabotaging yourself for no reason, right? So yeah, don't do that, right? And again, don't feel shy about talking about these things, right? What do you want to achieve in the next year? Right? What skills do you wish to develop? Right? Talk about those things. Tomorrow, if you want to develop some skills, if you need the organization's help in it, by help in it, you could say, I want my organization to send me for a certain program, a certain course. I want to take it online. Those are things that you need to mention here, right? Don't expect your boss and organization to dream about it. So no place to feel shy here, right? So that's the point that I want to make. Decide how to respond to a bad review. Think of possible criticisms you might receive for your performance. You know your boss reasonably well. You know what your performance has been. So think of those things and prepare responses for each one. Give clear examples that counter the criticisms that there are. If you need to counter the criticisms, you don't always need to do it, but if you feel that there is a reason for you to, there's a logical reason for you to counter the criticism, that's what you need to. That's what Pooja Kamath would do, and she'd do it brilliantly, right? If we had a certain critique, she was prepared with the answers because she knew us well. She knew our expectations, but there's always a gap between our expectation and her reality of what she had to deliver through the year, right? So for those criticisms, she would have the appropriate responses which would help. And then when you prepare your responses accordingly, it doesn't seem like you're getting defensive around them, right? They don't tend to surprise you in any way during the performance appraisal if you think that through. And of course, there'll be stuff beyond what you've thought of that will also come as an area of improvement, as a criticism, so on and so forth, of your performance during the last year. And leverage recency bias, right? The nearer you are to your performance review, the better you need to perform, right? Whether you like it or not, the recency bias is something which comes into place. If your cycle is from April to March, right, and let's assume March is when your appraisal happens, listen, what you've done in April, May, June, that's the reason why it's important for you to prepare, make a note of all the projects that you worked on, all your achievements, all your appreciations, what you've done well, because people will tend to forget what happened during this time, and what will be in their faces what happened during Jan, Feb and March, right? Very close to this. So if you perform really well during that time, that'll be fresh in the minds of your boss. If you don't perform well during this time, even that will be fresh in their boss, in their minds, right? So you need to keep that in mind, because the recency bias, like it or not, plays a big role. Oh my god, this is such an important thing, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, again, having done so many performance appraisals in the past, I know how it plays in my mind, right? I had a person that did really well in the first kind of 9 months of the job, 8 months actually, in that year. And the last 4 months of the job, he totally screwed up, right? He didn't do very well for a lot of kind of reasons. And then the appraisal was, because this was more recent, the appraisal is always going to lean on this side, whether you like it or not, when your last 4 months you performed in a disastrous way, right? Because after these months, even if we wanted to give somebody a promotion, it's like, oh, you know what, we were thinking of giving you a promotion because of this performance, but now you've proven once again that you don't deserve that performance because of your yo-yo way of performing, right? You perform well for a while, you don't do it, then you perform well, then you don't do it. And you can't have such inconsistencies if you're going to be a leader of people, especially. So many people suffer from this yo-yo performances that are not good, and especially if the downturns happen closer to the appraisal date, right? Now, a bunch of questions here for you to take to your coach. Prepare for a performance appraisal by conducting a self evaluation of your performance in the past year, right? So this is how we're going to train you on how to do it. How do you think you performed in the last year? Highlight right now, right? Pause this video and do these things. How do you think you performed in the last year? Highlight both your positive aspects and what your areas of improvement were. And don't be shy right now. Make a note of your notable achievements in the past year, right? Do exactly the process that we told you to do. If you can't remember what your notable performances were, go through your calendar, go through your diary, and kind of remind yourself of the good stuff that you've done. Make a note of, think of the possible criticisms you might receive for your performance. Prepare responses for each one of them, right? Of what they would be. If you have access to your performance appraisal, or look at the last one, use it to rate yourself on the given parameters, right? Ideally, pause the video right here and start doing these things immediately. Alternatively, complete the exercise at a later time prior to your live session with the coach. And then we want you to discuss these answers with your coach. So it's some kind of a practice for you, right? In terms of talking, so that you can actually do that performance appraisal better, right? Now, during the performance appraisal, what are you supposed to do? Get your manager's feedback input on the following. What do you think went well during this year? What can I do to improve my rating in this area in the next year? Okay, have to give you some feedback here, ladies and gentlemen, because these are things that I've a lot of times. The reason why people generally don't do well in their career is they don't communicate in a direct way with people, right? And a lot of people have told me, maybe this is what happens in Indian culture. I haven't worked outside of India largely, but at least in India, and they say it's because of our culture, right? Cultural background. Because when we talk to our elders, we're not supposed to be direct, right? And a boss often is an elder, so we're very scared of talking directly, asking direct questions. So that's what people have told me. I don't know whether that's true, but I can tell you that some huge problems lie because of gaps in communication, and the gaps of communication happen largely because we don't communicate directly and candidly. We don't ask direct questions, right? And the best question to ask somebody, if you're when you get your manager's feedback, is very simply this question of, what can I do to improve my rating in this area next year, right? And if you want to add to that, you can say, boss, what are the 2 or 3 things you want me to do? So always ask a question in this way, right? What are the 2 or 3 things you want me to do to improve my rating in this year, right? So because the minute you say 2 or 3, for your boss, now he needs to give you the 3 points which you need to sit and make write down on your notepad, right? Don't just go into a performance appraisal without your notepad. You need to actually write them down and say, okay, so these are the 3 things that you want me to improve, and if I improve those 3 years, I will get a better rating, right, next year. And your boss will be like, yeah, this is the way you in a way negotiate during your appraisal on everything, right? By asking these direct questions. How can I, like, simple, what can I do to improve my rating in this area, after he tells you what you need to improve yourself on, right? What do you think went well this year? Now, what can I do to be more helpful to my team, right? So that's something that you can ask him. How can I contribute more towards the organization? Is there anything there that you want me to do? How can I make your job easier? Extremely important question to ask your boss, right? This is the part where you go about delighting your boss. So these 3 questions, super important to get your manager's input and feedback. And remember that the performance appraisal, like the first slide said earlier, performance appraisal was possibly just about discussing salaries. Now performance appraisals is much more than that. It's for you to get an in-depth understanding of where you stand, what you need to improve on, which in turn has an impact on your salary and a lot of those things. So take the time to discuss these things. You don't get an opportunity through the year because you're so busy doing other stuff to talk about stuff like this, of getting your manager's feedback on stuff, right? Very, very important to do that. Acknowledge mistakes and demonstrate openness towards feedback. Okay, that's something which is a very good sign if you can do that. We've asked you to be prepared as far as the feedback and criticisms you may get, but that doesn't mean that you're not open to that particular criticism that there is. Being prepared means in a lot of cases there would be solid reasons why you couldn't do a certain thing, behaved in a certain way, couldn't work on a certain project, right? There could be those reasons. In those cases, you don't want to keep quiet about those real reasons that are there for it, right? But there could be a lot of other things where you've made genuine mistakes without realizing it, and those are the ones that you want to acknowledge. And you want to demonstrate that openness towards the things that you haven't realized have been mistakes, right? And always remember that when you're having any kind of a discussion, both parties don't need to agree on everything, right? You don't need to convince your boss about everything. You need to tell him, this is what my point of view is. You could have a differing point of view. I hear your point of view, you hear out my point of view, and let's in a way agree to disagree, or let's agree somewhere in the middle of this thing, right, where there wouldn't be a complete agreement on stuff, right? So for example, if you said, to do this proactive project, we didn't have enough time because we were working on a lot of reactive operational stuff, which could be the reality, but your boss could say, well, I acknowledge that there were a lot of reactive and operational things to do during this year, but if you have if you had delegated better, if you had managed your time better, if you had said no to stuff that you shouldn't do, you would have still gotten the time to work on that proactive, right? So in a way, your point of view is, I had too much to do. His point of view to say, I acknowledge that you had too much to do, but you could have done these 3 things well, for you to kind of you know do that as well, and then you can agree somewhere in between, right? Of that thing. And those are tricky kind of discussions to have, but that's what I mean by acknowledging mistakes and demonstrating openness towards that feedback, right? Now, mutually agree on the key performance indicators, the KPIs, for the next 3, 6, or 12 months. Get as much clarity as you can here, right? Your performance appraisals is the one time where you don't want to rush the meeting, right? Where you don't want to rush the meeting. I'll tell you, this is as a joke. When Pooja Kamat's appraisals used to happen in the office, there was a running joke where they would call it Sundarkand, right? And I think Sundarkand is something in our mythology, which is something that just goes on forever. Because with her appraisals, I'm not kidding you, sometimes it would take half a day, sometimes it would take a full day, sometimes it would take 1.5 days to do her appraisals, right? And the reason why that is very simply because she would be dead serious about those appraisals. Both of us would realize that we don't get the time to have these discussions otherwise. So both of us would say, okay, we're not going to put a time limit on these discussions because we want to chat in detail about each one of the elements, right? So when we would put her key performance indicators down, she would have a lot of questions around it and there would be a lot of discussion around it, which would take time. But my point is, it's okay. You as a subordinate, don't try to rush these discussions. Don't say, oh, my boss has got a lot of other things to do. And as a matter of fact, if your boss, for your appraisal gives you very little time, that's the one time that you say, boss, we don't get the time to chat that often about a lot of these things. I know you scheduled just 1 hour for this, but if possible, let's just have a 2-hour window so that we can really discuss stuff in detail around what I need to do next year, what my goals are, where I need to do better. And that shows a certain kind of maturity from your end, and that you're taking your work seriously, your career seriously, the organization seriously. It shows a lot of those things which are very important, right? So mutually agree on those key performance indicators. I've mentioned this before, but assertively communicate your achievements, highlight instances where you outperformed and the effect it had, quantify achievements where possible. Okay, so the quantification is just very, very important wherever you can, and share whatever career plans you have, right? Oh my God, so many people are so shy in terms of, again, sharing their career plans. What could a career plan be? Somebody could say, hey, I've worked in this department a lot, I've got a lot of exposure, now I want to get exposed to some other departments as I go ahead. It may not be something that you can do immediately, but you can do it over a couple of years. But that's the direction in which I want to go. I want to get varied experience across different departments, right? On the other side, you could share your career plans as to say that, hey, you know what, I want to get into team leadership roles, right? So I want to get experience there. So whatever your career plans are, or it could be something, a niche within your department itself that you want to specialize in, right? So again, you can share that in terms of saying, this is what I want to do as I go ahead. And the more you do that, the more clarity you give your boss on it, whether it's possible or not in your organization. It's just important for you to share those career plans that you have, right? Yes, Arunima.
So for point number 4, the quantification of achievements was again an eye opener for me, because my first performance appraisal, I didn't know something I could do because my role again, because you know that there are fixed targets. For me, I didn't know how you can say this is how I performed. Hello, can you hear me?
Not that clearly, Arunima. Can you repeat what you said?
So, yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Great. Yeah. So for quantification, when I had my performance appraisal with our COO, she guided me. She told me exactly how much money in a way I'd brought in for the company in terms of all the clients I'd serviced.
Yeah.
So she said, these are the 5 major clients you've done content projects for. Each of them was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you bought in X lakhs.
Yeah.
Rather you serviced X lakhs amount
Yeah.
of business for us. And
Yeah.
she told me that, and for me that was very eye-opening. It made me feel, of course, good, and it made me realize where I was lacking. This number should have come from me to her, saying this is why this is how my performance has been, because I've serviced this much amount of business single-handedly.
Yeah.
So that is a major eye opener for me. So
Yeah.
for the subsequent performance appraisals that I had, I would go with that number
Yeah.
myself, saying that,
Yeah.
and like you gave one example, this is how much business I've serviced. These are how many programs of mine out of 30 programs, how many got 5 on 5, how many got
Yeah.
4 on 5.
Yeah.
So it really puts that quantification a very, very important aspect, especially for
Correct.
people who have non-numeric parameters of
Correct. And it makes so
work.
much of sense, right? You're making the job so much easier for your boss by doing that during
Yes,
the appraisal, right? Because it's so
correct.
easy for people to forget all these things, right? It's so easy
Absolutely,
for your boss
correct.
to forget. Your boss often has 10 people that they're appraising. They don't have the time to go into the details of each one of their performances or to remember everything that has
Correct.
been done through the year. It's your job as an appraisee to take all these things seriously and make it damn
Correct.
easy for your boss to give you like the best
Correct.
appraisal possible, right?
It also links back to the idea of our specific communication that we covered
Yeah.
in class number 3,
Yeah.
where again it's so easy, because when you have a role that's more qualitative in nature, it's difficult to assess. Like, that was my original question to you. But when I put a number to it, it becomes very easy for us to have a discussion on whether it
Yeah,
went right, went wrong, because we can actually quantify it.
yeah, yeah,
So again, this was one of the biggest eye openers for me in my
yeah,
first performance appraisal, which is why I
yeah.
wanted to bring it up.
Yeah, yeah. Just another thing to always remember, right? So when you do this part well, right? When you do the part well of saying, these are all the projects. This is I worked on 30 projects during the
Yes.
year, right? And
Hmm.
this is the kind of rating that it got. Out of these 30 projects, this is the kind of appreciation that you got. You can also talk about the stuff that you didn't do well, right?
Correct.
Right, and
Correct.
that gives you the confidence then to talk about, these are the two projects that we worked on very hard, and they didn't go well, and these are all the
Yes.
things that I learned from that particular project. These are my big learnings. So you can talk
Correct.
about things that didn't go well and draw the learnings out of that and speak to your boss, so that your boss is clear that you're
Correct.
not going to repeat those kind of mistakes again,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
I think all of us need to remember that in most organizations, everything works like there's some bell curve. I'm no expert on bell curve, right? What the bell curve basically means in a way is that the bulk of people are going to be average, right,
Hmm.
which are going to be B players in the way, and then you'll have a bunch of people here at this end which are your A, then you'll have your total A plus players here, then you'll have your C and your C minus players in a way, right? So I'm just drawing a rough thing. I'm no expert on the bell curve. Now, every organization, when it comes to appraisals, say that their total salary bill is 1,000 rupees, and then they will decide as an organization that in the next year our salary bill can go to 1,250. Right? This
Hmm.
is what our
Hmm.
salary bill. So all the employees are going to be this 250 is what is as a raise is going to be distributed
Correct.
amongst all the employees, right? So then what happens is that most organizations will say that, okay, if you have 10 people in your department, only two of them can get A ratings, right? And this A rating would have a 15% kind of hike, which is there, right? Your bulk of the people, which is probably six people, will get a B rating, right? Which is probably some 7%. And your C would be the lowest, or there'll be people that are fired, right? So there could be certain people in this six, there would be borderline cases, right, of somebody who could be here or could be here.
Correct.
But this guy in a larger organization has already been mandated saying, yeah, you can only give two people an A and intern this thing, right? And this guy will get. Now, in medium sized organization like our organization, it may not be so hard pressed, right? These things
Hmm.
may not be so hard pressed. This still
Hmm.
is, by the way, right? So somebody like the CEO along with the finance team is going to come and say, okay, this is our salary bill, so this is how much our salary bill is going to be, so I have this 250 bucks to do the kind of appraisal across the board for people. I can't go
Right.
above that amount, and then that money will be distributed amongst people. Now, why is it that I'm
Got
telling
it.
you this thing? It's important. If you don't make this easy for your boss to give you that A appraisal, right, to give you that best appraisal, somebody else will give it, because in a lot of cases there are borderline cases that would be there, right, between
Correct.
three or four of y'all. All of y'all have done well, all of y'all are valuable. Now, who gets the better appraisal between y'all would depend on how you present your case,
Yeah,
to your
absolutely.
boss, right? So keep that in mind. Okay, now, exercise. Pause your video here after I give you the instructions. What is the typical feedback you receive from your manager during your performance appraisals? What steps are you taking to improve your performance based on her feedback, right? So make a note of these two things. You know, make a note of your answers. Take them to your coach to have a discussion on them. Okay. Now, what do you do after the performance appraisal? Summarize the key points of your discussion at the end of it, right? So that's a very, very, very important. You need to end your meeting with that summary. This is how all good communication must happen. We've done, if you don't know that you need to do a summary at this stage of the communication coaching program, you clearly not paid attention. Both you and us haven't done a good job, right? Like, summary is essential. At the end of the discussion, meetings of all kinds are not that effective unless a summary happens at the end. The summary always needs to have two elements. One element is the key points of the discussion, and then the action points that are there for you through the year, right? So ensure that you do that. Demonstrate gratitude irrespective of how your appraisal goes. It's important for you to demonstrate gratitude for the entire process of it, that your boss has taken out the time, to give you that feedback. And especially if you've devoted a certain amount of time, had a detailed discussion on it, demonstrate gratitude. Focus on the takeaways, not on the criticisms. Now, what this means is it's very important for you to internalize the negative feedback, the criticism, the areas of improvement that is there. There's no doubt about them, but focus on the takeaways connected to that. Means that don't get into a negative mode where you're saying, oh, why did my boss say that? Or, I'm doing such a terrible job. So don't kind of don't sink into that the criticism, then keep criticizing yourself after that, right? So see what the takeaways are from that thing. uh, Proactively communicate progress throughout the year. Do not wait for the next review to highlight your improvement on KPIs, right? Yeah, very very important. Right now, more often than not, I can tell you, as a leader of people, um, there are some people within our organization that will proactively communicate good work done and progress made on certain things, right? They will communicate that personally to me. When we get on calls sometimes to discuss other issues, once that issue is over, they will share certain things with me, or it could be in the form of email. But they really take the effort to proactively communicate the progress that they're making, and they don't wait through at for the end of the year for that to happen, right? And that's exactly what you must do through the year, because you need to remember that your bosses are often having their own things to firefight, and they may not have the time uh, or observation, right? Sometimes a mix of both, to observe every little good thing that you do. I often appreciate my people for bringing it up to me, right? Because I tell them, listen, if you don't tell me about your achievements, I can't dream about your achievements, right? A lot of cases they could come up to me, but in a lot of cases they won't come up to me. So please proactively learn to communicate. That is not showing off. That is just being smart about, for both yourself, your boss, and your organization, right? If you're a great performer in your organization, you're valuable. Your boss, super boss, need to know that you're valuable, right? So that you benefit, they benefit, and the organization benefits from it. If they don't know that you're valuable, none of y'all are going to benefit from it, right? So just keep that in mind. Okay. As it now, just to summarize this thing, just you can read this very quickly. I'll give you 30 seconds to go through this entire thing. This is just a summary of all the things that we discussed. Arunima, you can brainstorm and tell me if there are any questions that you have, or anything that you think I haven't explained well enough.
No, I think we went into thorough details with
Yeah, so pause
each
it here
section.
and read this entire thing. um, Okay, good. So reflection zone, I'm sure you've had a lot of takeaways here, but again, pause the video, write your top 3 to 5 takeaways from this large section. Ensure your takeaways are in the form of specific and implementable action points, and you know that you need to take these takeaways back and have a discussion with your coach on them. Okay, now part 2, part B, job interviews. Let's rock and roll. Okay, now other sessions linked to this topic, right? So Arima just put down other sessions that can help in job interviews. These are sessions that you hopefully done before during the CCP, because just for example, right, power grooming, right, how you dress for interviews is so important, right? But this session is not a detailed session on how to dress well, so hopefully you've been through power grooming. Corporate etiquette and professionalism, so important, right, for a job interview, what you're supposed to do. This session is not a detailed session on it, but we have a detailed session on it that you hopefully been through. Mastering conversational skills, because often interviews go into being just conversation, so you need to know how to do that well if it goes in that zone, right? So just these are some of the topics that you need to go through, or do a revision of these topics if you've been through them before, that can help you in job interviews. Right now, again, we've divided it into in the same way. What do you need to do before the interview, what do you need to do during the interview, and what do you need to do after the interview? Right now, so before the interview, when you're going for an interview, Do your research about the job and the company. Prepare answers to commonly asked questions. Note the questions you want to ask and other important aspects of this. So, we're going to go into the details of each one of these things. So, let's start with do your research about the job and the company. Okay, now I told you at the start that I have done a lot of performance appraisals, but by default, since Work Better has grown so quickly over these years, uh, I have literally done hundreds of job interviews at different levels of management, right? And the one thing which is almost the most sure shot way in which a person is not going to get a job, if he has not researched on your company and the job well enough, right? If he's not done that, he's not going to get the job. And I can tell you that in almost 30% of cases, almost 30% of cases, especially at junior mid levels, right? People have come for interviews to me without researching on the company, right? And that is so poor. And those that 30% has never got the job at Work Better. And I'm sure other organizations would treat them in the same way, right? Therefore, if you're going to go for a job interview, please thoroughly research the organization. And it's so easy to do. Start with their website, right? The website of the company, you need to go through that website in as much detail as possible. You need to make notes about all your understanding of what kind of products and services does the company have, how those products and services are delivered, what the company talks about as the USPs or why somebody should work with that company, what are the revenues of the company if that is publicly available information, what is the profit before and after tax if that is publicly available. Go to the blog and news and press section and see why they've been featured, what they've been featured of, see who the management of the company is, learn a little bit about the history of that company, when it was started, what happened through the years about them, look at the awards and recognitions that are there for them. Are you getting my point? What are the new products that have been launched? Listen, guys, if you're going for a job interview, you need to do that, right? Then of course, get into you'll be updated on the latest industry, so this will give you the background, latest industry trends. It will help you formulate questions to ask during the interview, right? And of course, if you can research on that particular job that you're going to go in for, right? If you can do any research, that sometimes limited information maybe there of the particular job that you're going to get, right? But you can always read about that job on different forums as to what that job entails. If you don't have experience in that job, you can read about what that job entails, right? But this is something which is super important. After going through the company's website, you need to also go through their social media, because there's so much that is happening on their social media, right? So get an understanding of the job role, find out what skills are needed for the role, go on LinkedIn and find people who hold similar roles, look at their backgrounds and identify keywords, use them in your own resume as well. Talk to people who have a similar role and understand their background and experience. Ask them what it takes to be successful and what some of the job expectations are, right? If you can do this, great, right? If you can take that extra effort, it's really going to help you crack a job if you can do that, right? Research the company you will be interviewed for. I mentioned this. Go through the company's website, do this, run a Google search for the current news on the company, look at their social media presence, right? Oh god, look at this. This is 47% of interviewers don't give jobs to interviewees with little or no company knowledge. I mentioned 30%, but 47% of don't give them jobs, right? And you'll be shocked how many people come for interviews without that. I'll share another thing that pisses me off, right? um, Very often in our office reception, there's a sofa. There are a couple of sofas that are laid out, so we always have people there that are sitting for job interviews. And that's the reception is in a way where the door to the toilet and the pantry is through that reception that you go in there. So very often when I'm going to the pantry or the toilet, I'm like walking through that and I'm seeing people who are waiting for interviews and they're busy on Instagram or doing some rubbish on their phone, or playing some game or doing something like that, instead of using that time also to kind of research on different aspects connected to the job, right? Because very often I can understand that people may not have time. If they're doing another job, if they're busy with another thing and they're coming for a job interview, they may not have the time to kind of go into great depth. But at least if you're waiting for probably 15-20 minutes, you can use those 50-20 minutes to get all the additional information that you want to connect it to the company, right? You may have gone through the website but not through the social media. Don't be an idiot and waste your time playing games, or you can read up more. And just one thought could help you so much through that process, right? So this is what you're supposed to do. Understand the company life and culture. Search on glassdoor.com to gather information about work life balance in the target company. Okay, I have to tell you a little bit of Glassdoor. um in As Work Better, I know for a fact that we do stuff in a fairly reasonable way, right? For prospective employees, for existing employees, but we're also very performance oriented, right? And we have so much of reviews on Glassdoor where people have put in reviews where they say, oh, this company is so unprofessional because they asked me to come for 4 rounds of interviews and then they rejected me at the CEO level. If the CEO only has to take certain decisions, then why did they have to put me to 4 rounds? And this is very unprofessional. And we're thinking, saying, huh, for this role, this is something which is important, and this is where the CEO wants to play a part, because we're very particular about who comes in our company, and that person is important in the CEO's mind. So he's interviewing you or the CEO in a certain cases. So then, because people have insane expectations, and they once they're rejected for a certain load today, they want to lash out on a company on social media, right? That's what they want to do. So when you're looking at your Glassdoor reviews of a certain company, every large company is going to have bad reviews that are going to be put there. Every company, forget bad, a big company, but the big companies, given the volumes that they hire at and the amount of people that are there, are likely to have more bad reviews than a smaller company. Right now, if you more often than not, on a place like Glassdoor, only if you have something negative to say, you're going to go and say it there. If you have something positive, you're rarely going to say it, right? So be very careful about the assessments that you're making of Glassdoor, right? That is my kind of suggestion of any company that you go to. Now, if you see something which is an overwhelming, just bad reviews all around, right? Then you may kind of be a little suspicious of that company. But I also need to tell you that every company has a team that kind of knows how to cover up information on social media, right? They have their PR teams, social media teams to cover up those things. So again, go through Glassdoor, but that's not don't take it way too seriously, because there may not be truth to it, right? And that's my experience so far. But important to just give a cursory kind of glance to it, and see whether there's something shocking that comes out from there, right? If you can connect with existing employees to understand the organizational culture, work hours, and how they treat the employees, yeah. And this, if you can find a mutual connect to some people within the organization, and LinkedIn would be a good place to see whether you have any mutual connects. That's often the best thing to do, right? Talk to actual people that are working there for you to understand the life and culture. Research the organization's competitors to see how the company you are interviewing with is different, and this will help you even during the interview. You can discuss how the company is better than their competitors, right? So you can kind of talk about that. Any knowledge connected to that company, even competitors, is something that's going to help you, right? Learn the latest industry trends. You will come off as an informed candidate, right? Find out if there are any publications or journals related to the job industry that you need to read blogs, social media sites connected to the latest industry trends. You want to demonstrate proficiency and background in the industry, because it showcases you're enthusiastic about the job, company, and the interview that you're doing. Right now, let's assume that you're somebody from the learning and development industry, right? Let's take somebody that's like a content developer or an instructional design developer, right? If you're coming for an interview, even if you've been in that job for a while, and if you're going for an interview, I would expect somebody that's keeping a track of what's happening in their industry, right? What is the latest that's happening in the learning and development industry? A question may or may not come up connected to that, right? But the more well informed you are of what's happening in the industry, it'll just serve you well everywhere, not just during the interview. It's just going to serve you well, right? So again, instead of reading off 100 things which are useless information, please devote your time to keeping yourself abreast on the latest that's happening in your industry, right? Or in the job profile that you have. That's something that will help you, right? There's a very nice quote that says every person must know everything about something and something about everything, right? So you can kind of take this in any way, but everything about something and something about everything, but keeping yourself abreast is really going to help you, right? Now, prepare answers to commonly asked question. That's the other thing that you need to do before your interview. Prepare your key points to commonly asked questions, anticipate challenging questions, and prepare accordingly. Now, what we've done in your learning resources is we've shared a list of questions along with sample answers as a part of your learning resources, right? So this can really help you just go through them and get a drift of what are the kind of answers that you can give. However, very important for you to remember, do not memorize your answers, right? If you memorize your answers, what tends to happen is your brain is trying to think of, oh, what are those 3 points that I'd memorized there? And then you'll make a total hash of your interview, right? So you just kind of go through those answers to give you a broad orientation of what you need to say, just to be prepared. Never memorize answers for your interviews, right? Now, prepare the questions you want to ask, right? So going prepared with questions shows you're interested in the role. It also shows you do your homework and should be taken seriously. Don't ask questions about information you can get from research, right? This is very, very important. Again, I've had people ask me questions like, so what does work better do in an interview, right? And that interview literally ended within 10 minutes, right? If you're going to come and ask me what does work better do, you're clearly an idiot, right? That doesn't deserve the job, because that's information that you can get. Oh, but when did work better start, right? Again, idiot. Get out of my office immediately, right? Because you're absolutely stupid if you've not done research on when we've started, how long we've been around for. All this information is just publicly available information on my website. That means you haven't taken the effort to go through it, right? So these are the questions that you shouldn't be asking somebody, right? That's where you do your homework. Okay, so pause the lecture here and make a list of possible questions you can ask as an interviewer to somebody, right? You can do that. You can pause here and think of the few things that come to your head to start with. Okay. Now, possible questions to ask. Again, I'm not going to run through each one of these. Arunima also give all these questions as a learning resource as well to people. But
Yes.
pause the lecture here and you can just read these questions that you could possibly ask, right? And the one thing to remember is there would be certain interviewers that you would sense immediately are more amicable, more open to kind of answer questions, more communicative. You'll understand that by the way they talk, their body language. So that's the right time you really dive deep and get the answers to all the questions that you have. On the other side, you may get a sense with certain people that it's too early for them to be amicable with you. It's too early for them to really get into all these details with you, right? Because it could be a first round of an interview, so on and so forth. So they may not be that interested in answering that question. You need to be smart enough to sense that, right? Who are the people that want to get into the details? Who are the people that don't want to get in the details? Because the last thing that you want to do is you don't want to come across as an irritating character, an over enthusiastic character, right? So that's when you need to judge that based on how they're speaking, their body language, so on and so forth, right? But for the person that is willing to answer your questions, you need to be ready with a lot of these things. And for a lot of these answers, at some point during that interview process with someone, during that interview process, you must get answers to these questions, because that will help you decide whether you want to take up that job or not, right? Because these are things that are important to you, and especially they keep becoming more and more important as you become more senior in the hierarchy, right? So pause it here, go through these answers. Okay, now dress and groom appropriately. Always wear formal clothes regardless of the dress code of the company. choose an outfit that will make you feel confident, right? So here, even if that, oh, the company culture is to wear casual clothes, sure, no problem. Once you join that company, wear whatever the clothes that you want to, but at least when you're going for the interview, try to wear formal clothes, right? So that really helps, because you're not sure as to how the other person, the HR person, may react to it. You just want to play safe during the interview. You don't want to show them that, oh, I dress well casually. That's not the time to do it. Choose an outfit that will make you feel confident, right? So choose an outfit that you're totally comfortable with. As a lady, if you're more comfortable wearing salwar kameezes, please go with that, because the last thing that you want to do is be thoughtful about your kind of your the way you've dressed, and decide what you'll wear the night before, so you won't be rushed in the morning. These are some stats. 55% of interviewers say that interviewers respecting dress codes make a great first impression. 65% of hiring managers says that a dress code can be the deciding factor between two candidates. Oh, that's pretty high, right? But some of these factors are more unconscious factors that play on people's mind without even them realizing that, right? Yes, Arunima, tell me.
When there are multiple rounds of interviews,
Yes.
when you go for the first one, you're formally dressed and you see that it's a very casual attire sort of environment. What would you recommend for your next round? Do you still go dress formally, or do you sort of try to um, uh, dress according to the workplace culture?
It's a tough question. I don't really know the answer to that, but I'll tell you what I would do, right?
Hmm.
I don't know whether there's a good answer to it. Through the entire interviewing process, I would dress formally or semi
Hmm.
formally at least,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
That's what I would do, right? So I go the first interview wearing formal clothes. I realize that, oh, everyone around me seems to be wearing informal clothes. The next time I could go with my khaki pants, but I'd still wear a
Hmm.
shirt, right? And
Got
go.
it.
I'm not going to wear my toned jeans, and I'm not going to, you get that? I'm not going to
Yes.
do that, because I don't know who's going to interview me. I don't know what their mindset
Correct.
is. I don't know what their thought process is. I don't know whether front end role, back end role. Because if you've seen in our office, what we tell people is, if you're not going to be customer facing, please wear whatever clothes you want to wear. It's up to you. But if
Correct.
you're going to be customer facing on a certain day or an interaction, you have to be dressed in proper formals, right? So
Correct.
that's what it is in our organization. So if somebody comes in with informal clothes for the second round, because he's seen everybody in office is wearing informals, I would be like, okay, what's wrong with this guy, right? That's
Hmm.
the thing that would come to my mind. Now, of course, if he's brilliant on everything else, there's no problem. We would still hire him, right? But it's just something that I would say, play safe, right? During
Correct.
that period. That's my point.
I guess I guess you're also in some sort of way showing respect for the interview process by
Correct.
even if you know that people dress formally,
Correct.
you are still not a part of the organization. You are still interviewing as a
Correct.
candidate, so you
Correct.
want to sort of show that through the way you
Correct.
dress.
Correct. So that's what I
Great.
would do, right? But of course, I can in rare situations it could flip on the other side as well, right? In a lot of
Mm-hmm.
ad agencies, possibly, where people are, or ad agencies or creative agencies, where people often dress in an informal way. They'd be like,
Right.
"Yaar, ye kaun aa gaya suit pen ke," right?
Hmm.
So that could
Correct.
be the other way where it could flip around. But in more
Hmm.
cases, it's better to play safe than in those odd cases where
Correct.
it could play out on the other side for
Yeah,
you,
absolutely.
right? Now, bring what you need. Always carry paper copies of your resume for you and your interviewer to refer to. Arunima, I can tell you so many times, like, this kind of basic stuff is not done, right? Like, it is crazy how people say, oh, but oh, I send my CV across to you. Yeah, sure, you send your CV across to me, no doubt. But at that point of time, if you give me your CV, if I ask for your CV and if you don't have it, that's
Yep.
just stupid, right? So carry it, and carry a work portfolio with proof of your skills and achievements. Compiling it builds your confidence, jogs your memory. Having it in an interview will build your credibility and make it easier for you to tell your stories, right? And of course, when you're carrying your kind of resume, ensure that you put it in a file, where it's not crumpled and it's very, very clean, right? So let me kind of quickly, as our organization started getting bigger, the HR person, before the interviewee came in, would hand me a copy of their of their kind of resume, right? That's because we got
Mhm.
to a size of 75 people. But when we were 12 or 13 people, the HR person wouldn't have the time to do that because we had a much smaller team. So at that point of time, I wouldn't have their copy with me, right? And I would ask them saying, hey, do you have a copy with you? And then they'd be like, oh no, I don't have a copy with me. And I'm thinking, what the hell is wrong with you? You come for an interview, you don't even have a copy. Sure, you send the copy across, but that doesn't mean that you don't carry one, right? So immediately you've got, you started the interview on a wrong note, right? So yeah, don't do that.
I have a,
Yeah,
you mentioned the sofa where the candidates usually sit.
yeah,
Often, if we pass by, we would offer them water or just ask them if they're waiting for someone. And I
yeah,
remember this one candidate. I don't even think she made it to the first round because when I asked her, "Oh, do you need to call someone for you?" She mentioned the recruiter's name, and she said, "Is there any place I can print my resume?" And
yeah,
I found it so hilarious that you've
yeah,
come for an interview and you're going to print your resume in our office. That's
yeah,
really, I mean, it would give off such a bad, if she were to ask that to the HR person directly.
yeah.
I can't imagine what kind of impression that would leave on the person
Absolutely.
who's interviewing her.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Absolutely. Okay, reach early, obvious but important. Plan to arrive for your interview 10 to 15 minutes before the appointed time. Use Google Maps so that you know exactly how long it's going to take. If you're taking public transport, identify a backup if there are delays and closures, right? uh, that's very, very important. Now, just secondly, right, I just want to, you need to reach early, 10 to 15 minutes early, but don't expect your interviews to start at the time which they're supposed to start at, right? So please don't have such fake expectations in and fake and wrong expectations in your life, right? Because when you're going for an interview, and especially at more junior levels, however professional the company is, interviews kind of, if back to back interviews are happening, they will spill over. A lot of such things will happen, so expect delays to happen there. Don't get irritated and frustrated while you're waiting at the reception when those delays happen, right? Because I've seen this happening in every organization, and there's no choice in some cases, right? Use that additional time that you get for more research. Use that additional time, and of course, if it goes beyond a certain point, you may want to remind the recruiter or whoever it is that you have another thing lined up, you have another interview, so if they can speeden up the process. But don't let it irritate you while you're at their office, right? Now, during the interview, what can you do? We're going to talk about three things: answering the question, tell me about yourself, the R method of answering, and other points to keep in mind, right? Now, the most common question that you get during an interview is, tell me about yourself, right? More often than not, that's the first question that's going to pop up. So if you want to be prepared for anything well, you want to be prepared for this question well, right? And how can you answer this question? Using a little bit of a elevator pitch, right? And this, in my opinion, is what you need to cover broadly, right? Full name, educational background, work biography or experience, which is your two or three. If you have 10 jobs, you don't need to talk about all of them, but you can talk about your two or three most prominent jobs, the roles that you held, major projects you worked on, positions of leadership, important achievements, and your key competencies, skills, and areas of strength, right? This is the first thing. Now, okay, I'll tell you why this is so important, right? When somebody says, tell me about yourself, it's a very open ended question that they're asking you, right? So during this question, you can more or less say whatever you want to say about yourself, and kind of pin certain things in that person's mind, right? So you may not get a chance to talk about some important achievements that you've had. You may not have time to talk about, or it may not be asking your key competency, skills, areas of strength. Maybe they're going to ask you, maybe they won't, you don't know. But those are thoughts that you want to get across in that interviewer's head. That's what you want to do, right? And that's why this tell me about yourself is such an important question, and you need to have a good answer prepared for it. Now, in my experience, of course, this is where a person impresses me right at the start if he has a very good answer prepared for this. If he doesn't have a good answer prepared for it, literally in the first 2 to 5 minutes, I am switched off. That shouldn't be the case. If I want to be a good interviewer, I shouldn't let the first 3 to 5 minutes really, I shouldn't make an impression of whether I'm going to hire him or not based on that. That's what you're taught as an interviewer, right? But very often, like it or not, you make certain long lasting impressions about that other person based on what he does in the first 3 to 5 minutes. And that's why the way he dresses is important, the way he sits at that interview is important, and how he answers this question becomes very, very important, right? So, because of the first impression, and secondly, you can cover and pin certain areas that you want to get across to the interviewer that you may not get a chance to talk about later, because then the interview is basically dictated by the questions asked by the interviewer, right? He's going to dictate the flow, but this is the one point where you can cover. Now, the mistake that people make is they talk about stupid and silly stuff when somebody says, tell me about yourself, right? And they'll say, okay, tell me about yourself. I have a wife, I have 3 kids, I have a dog. This is where I've stayed at. These are some of my hobbies. Who cares about your hobbies, right? The person ahead doesn't care about your hobbies, right? He doesn't even care that much about what your family status is, right? That's got nothing to do with what you need to really cover. If he asks you that later, great, but that's not something that you want to get across right at the start. At the start, you want to start off with an elevator pitch about yourself, right? So you want to tell them your name, educational background, all of these things, right? Now, this is, you can read this because I think this is example of an elevator pitch. Arunima made something of herself as well, which I thought was lovely. And I think is exactly the way it should be done, right? So if you see here, she started with her educational qualifications. Okay, started with her name, of course, then her educational qualifications. Um, right, and then she's talked about, I started my career at a corporate training firm, Work Better, which focuses on this. I was employed there for 4 years as a learning solutions consultant. My primary role was to create learning content on soft skills such as I have created learning content both for classroom and virtual learning formats. I have worked with numerous clients in diverse industries such as this. These are the key awards. I was awarded this thing for my roles. I believe these are my strengths, right? I demonstrate extreme seriousness and passionate towards my work, but I try not to take myself too seriously, but I like to think that people appreciate myself. Okay, so this is a great kind of answer to tell me something about yourself. Right now, in Arunima's case, because she's just got 4 years of experience, she's just been in this one job. It's this. Now let's look at somebody who has 20 years of experience and they probably worked at 6 companies, right? So you don't need to talk about all 6 of them. You can talk about, I started my career here. You can say, I want to tell you about 2 or 3 of the prominent places where I had relatively large stints. This was one place and this is what I did there. This was the second place and this is some of the things that I did there. This is the third place and this is some of the things that I did there. These are some of the key awards that I won and the key achievements that I had at each one of these places. These are some things that I consider my strengths. These are some things that I consider my area of expertise, right? So that's a great way to start your elevator pitch and set the impression right and put certain things in that interviewer's head. Okay, you can pause on it, go through it again if you want. Okay, and then prepare an elevator pitch for yourself. When asked the question, tell me something about yourself, pause the lecture here, complete this exercise or attempt it later prior to your live coaching class. And in your coaching class, you're going to do a session where the coach is going to ask you saying, tell me something about yourself. And then you need to answer the question, keeping some of those things in mind. So that is good practice for you the next time that you go for a job interview. Okay. Now, when you're answering questions, the R method, this is so lovely, this R method, right, is allows you to give a logical, structured, and informative answer. So what does the R method mean? Answer the question in a crisp and specific statement. Then R means give the reason for your answer, follow up your answer with a reason. And third, give an example, expand your answer with an example that proves the point. Now, you may not be able to do this for every question, right? But a lot of questions you can use this method of the R method, right? Now, let us give you an example of it. If a question is asked, what gives you satisfaction in the workplace, you can say, constant improvement gives me great satisfaction at the workplace. So this is the crisp answer that you give. The reason, there are two reasons for it. Firstly, the organization will experience the great benefits in productivity whenever there is constant improvement within workplace processes. Furthermore, on a personal level, constant improvement leads to greater job satisfaction, which in turn boosts performance and results. Over the long period, this will lead to career progression, which is something that I'm striving for within the industry. An example for that is whatever example that you want to give, right? So you've given the A, you've given the reason behind what you're saying, and then if there's an example that you want to give, you want to give that, right? So can you use this for every question? You may not need to or can use it for every question, but this is a beautiful way in which you can answer questions, because people often want to know the whys behind stuff, and people want to know examples of what you've done, right? Yes, Arunima.
And when I was studying this, this reminds me so much of our McKinsey pyramid as well, which is
Yeah,
you have your headline, which is your answer. Give
yeah,
the answer first,
absolutely.
give the supporting reasons for it, and then excuse me, and an example to support your overall. So
Yeah, yeah,
it's nothing different than what we've been teaching all this while.
absolutely, absolutely, right? Amazing this is. Okay, other points to keep in mind during the interview: stay confident, calm, and positive throughout. Speak clearly and enthusiastically about your experiences, accomplishment, and skills, right? So that's the one point where you want to be enthusiastic when you're talking about it. If you are asked about a low grade, a sudden job change, or a weakness in your background, don't be defensive. Focus on the facts to emphasize what you learned from the experience, right? So this is the difference between people who are good communicators, give good interviews, and people that are not, right? If you had a probably worked somewhere for 6 months and you decided that that was not the right place to work at, and you change a job, and then you'll be like, oh man, these 6 8 months are looking terrible on my resume, and somebody asks you, why did you just work here for 6 to 9 months? Be candid, tactful yet candid about what were the reasons behind that, right? You don't want to say, oh, my boss was a total idiot. You don't want to go on a tangent and seem like you're just saying stuff out of the blue, right? You don't want that. But you can be tactful while communicating, but be direct. You don't need to be defensive about that, right? Because there are lots of reasons why people would quit jobs earlier than expected, right? A sudden change can happen. If there are concrete reasons why for some years in your educational background you may not have got good grades, right? You may not have got good marks for whatever reason, right? There are those reasons. So you want to just be honest about them, right? You want to be tactful, yes, honest about them. And if you don't have an answer, don't get flustered. Admit that you can't answer that question. You just say, oh, that's a good question. I don't have a good answer to it. Right now, take your time to answer questions, which is point number two. You may need a few seconds to formulate, to process the question, and then formulate your answer. Don't be in a hurry to respond. Right now, when I'm doing interviews, I love it when the person on the other side, I ask them a complicated question, right? I have to tell you, one of the questions that I love asking people is in interviews is, what are the 2 or 3 biggest mistakes that you've made in your life, right? So I want to see his ability to kind of analyze, what have I done wrong in my life, right? The answer that I absolutely hate is no, I don't think I've made any mistakes in my life. That's one person that I've never hired, right? Because A, you've not made mistakes in a whole life. Okay, that's weird. You can't kind of analyze and be forthright about the mistakes that you made. That again is weird to me, right? But I like it when people say, when they say, that's an interesting question, give me a couple of seconds to think about it, right? And then when a person actually sits and thinks about it for whatever, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, there's silence, awkward silence, but they don't care about it, and they're just thinking, saying, let me think about it. And then they say, okay, you know what, the first mistake is this, second mistake. So they really process the answer well and then start answering it. And so many people don't do it. I asked them a question, what are 3 biggest mistakes? They feel they need to start immediately, and then they just start off, right? And when they start off, then the quality of the answers often is not that good. Right now, if somebody asks you a simple question saying, so, what's your educational background? Right now, that's not the kind of question where you need time to answer it. You know what your educational background is, or you probably already said it in a certain thing. But certain questions are more deeper questions, more complex questions, where you need to take the time. Be prepared to take the time before you answer it. Right now, other points to keep in mind: be honest, real, authentic. Don't make things up to sound impressive. Respond truthfully. Let your personality shine through. Don't try to be somebody else. People from HR and team leaders do a lot of interviews. So the one thing that they're relatively good at catching is people that are being fake, right? So you don't want to be fake in any way. You don't want to be putting on fake accents. You don't want to be talking in a, overtly more stylish way than you do what you think is stylish for some reason. You just want to be yourself when you speak, because the more you focus on trying to be somebody else, you're going to be caught up in that, and you're not going to be caught up in giving good quality answers on the other side, right? So be as real or authentic as you can be. Demonstrate positive body language. Same rules of body language that have been discussed earlier with you, so we're not going to get into that. And end on a positive note. When the interview winds down, thank the interviewer for their time. Ask them when they can expect to hear from them next, and what's the best way to follow up with them, right? So that's what you want to do. Now, after the interview, follow up with an email. Again, very, very good way of doing. Follow up with follow up the interview with a thank you email to whoever you met or had a discussion with, or a thank you message possibly on LinkedIn if you don't know their email ID. This shows your strong interest in the company and your sincerity. If the interviewer indicated that you will hear from them, send a follow up email on the day you're expecting a reply, right? So, doing this, a good follow up with the interviewer, is something which is very important and can often lead to you landing a job, right? For you, if you've done a good follow up. Because I know how the HR people come to me when they talk about a certain candidate, saying, hey, what happened about this candidate that you interviewed? Because he's doing a constant follow up with me on, whether he's got the job or not, or what's happening with the job or not, right? He's following up with me. And then often the tide turns towards that person, because he seems more keen on joining versus somebody else that's not followed up at all, right, with it. So a lot of these follow up things play a good role, right? So here again, you can pause the screen here, quickly go through a summary of all the points, because we've discussed a lot of things here. So you can go through it. Pause it and go through it. Okay. And what are your takeaways, right? So pause and put down your takeaways from this section. And if you have some overall takeaways, you want to do it during this time. Arunima, yes. Do you have any other questions?
I have one question.
Yes.
Could you give some advice or some pointers to keep in mind for someone who's senior in age specifically, who's interviewing with someone who's significantly younger? I'm certain, I'm not certain, but I'm sure that you may feel some sense of awkwardness. I'm not too sure what the mindset would be of such a person. So if you could give some inputs on that.
Listen, I'll tell you. Just I've had that situation a lot, right? Because I
Mm.
started work better fairly early on in my life. Right now, it's been 12 years, but I started literally when I was 26 or 27 or something like that, right? So yeah, right.
Correct.
So I had that situation a lot. From the other side, all that you expect is for a person to just come and have a normal conversation with another human being,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's it. That's what your mindset needs to be. And that's all that you think, right? The person could be much older, it could be the same age, or it could be younger. It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Because especially if people are going to interview at more new age companies, startups, right, younger
Correct.
companies, you're likely to come across people that are younger to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a mindset of every person should be that I am going to respect every person, whether they're older, younger, it doesn't matter, right? To me, if I want that job, and clearly I'm there for that interview because I want that job, um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to kind of just treat it like a normal conversation and be respectful towards that younger person as well, right? So this is a big mindset thing that needs to be there, right? That you need to walk in
Right.
that interview saying that, hey, as a as a 20-year-old experienced person, I know a lot of things in the domain that I'm coming here for to interview. I know a lot of things,
Correct.
but I'm sure as a younger founder, you know a lot of things about the company, about different areas, right? So I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
respect the fact that you may be young, but you may have certain natural talents, experiences that is the reason why you're there. So I know these things, you know these things, and I'm just going to be respectful and just go into that interview, right? So that needs to be the
Sure.
mindset. It's difficult because a lot of people don't have that
Mm-hmm.
kind of mindset, right? When you see somebody who's much more younger, and of course, as as an older person going for an interview, when you're being, it's very important for you to don't just get a job for the sake of getting a job. Right now, if somebody is really
Mm-hmm.
desperate, this rule may not apply to you, right? But um, when you're getting a job, if you feel that that younger person is not demonstrating enough respect towards your knowledge, maybe that's not the right place to join
Mm-hmm.
at all, right? So
Right.
as you become more senior, you are interviewing the person and organization as much as you are getting interviewed. Are you
Correct.
getting my point? So it's a
Yeah, I
two-way
am.
street, right? That you are interviewing them as much as they are interviewing you, because you're trying to determine
Mm.
whether this is the right place to come and join. Because I'm assuming the more senior, the more experience you have more options, right?
Right.
And when you have more options, you're like, okay, is this the right option or is that the right option? And therefore, if you remember our slide on being prepared with the questions to ask the
Yeah.
interviewer or the people on that side, that becomes a very, very important part for people, right? Unless you're totally
Correct.
desperate for a job and want to just
Correct.
get started, right? So I think that's a
Correct.
good question.
Okay. And another question that I had was when you're asked, tell me something about yourself. Now, what we have prescribed is
Yeah.
go with the elevator pitch.
Yeah.
uh, when I did some research, some of them pointed towards asking the interviewer specifically, what is it that you want to know about me? Do you want to know about my work, work biography? Do you want to know about my educational background? Do you recommend that when you're asked such a question, you try to narrow it down further, or you just sort of present your elevator pitch?
I wouldn't personally narrow it down further, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't do that, but I can, because your educational background in the end is literally what you need to talk about is your graduation and your post graduation,
Correct.
right?
Hmm.
At best, it'll be your PhD that you need to talk about, right? These are the three things
Correct.
that you need to talk about. So that's fairly quick. The person
Hmm.
doesn't want to go into how much you scored in which year and stuff. Those things are
Correct.
irrelevant to them, right? So
Hmm.
that's basically literally 5 to 10 seconds of what you're going to talk. So why would I ask him, do you want me to tell me that or tell you this, right?
Sure.
You don't want that. So that's a quick one line, and after that, your focus is largely on the prominent jobs and what you
Hmm.
achieved in those jobs. And
Right.
after that, what are the competency or the key skills or competency area or key skills that you've built, right? So this is
Hmm.
one job. This is what I did in that job. These are some of the areas, and these were some of my key achievements in that thing. Key achievements slash awards or whatever it is that I got there. This is the second prominent job that I had, and this is what I did in that job. And so that is what it needs to be around, right? Because again, for me, that that is the one
Correct.
time where somebody is giving you an open end saying, tell me something about yourself. Now, what is it that you want to pin in that person's mind, right? And
Yeah.
that's your opportunity to do that. And you want to do it around your jobs, your key achievements, the expertise that you've built, your competencies, so on and so forth, right? So I wouldn't ask any questions there. I would
Sure.
just jump into it straight.
Makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's it.
Right. And you just, of course, when you need to remember that the whole point of not getting flustered and being cool, calm, and
Mm-hmm.
confident, right? You may
Mm-hmm.
start this answer and some interviewer may be like, hey, I don't want to know about this right now. You say, okay,
Hmm.
cool, I won't tell you about this right now. Tell me, what do you want to know about?
Right.
Right. So at
Sure.
all points of time, be careful about that. And therefore I tell people, don't this is something I maybe we should have don't have a dream company, right?
Okay.
Don't have a dream company. have multiple companies which you would like to join if you're doing a job interview, right? So you
Mm-hmm.
say that, don't say like, oh, I only want to join Citibank. No, 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 that's putting too much of pressure on yourself during that interview, and then you'll start behaving totally funny.
Mm.
You can say that, oh, you know
Right.
what, I want to work for international banks that specialize in corporate lending, right? So then you give yourself a stand chart, a Citibank, an HSBC, and
Correct.
a bunch of 5 or 6 of those banks that are specialists in corporate lending that are international banks, right? So then even if one interview gets, you don't put pressure on each one of those interviews that are there, right? And you go for them. But the minute you say, oh, this is my dream company and I have to get this thing, trust me that
Correct.
it's far more detrimental for you than it is beneficial for you, right? So that's the whole cool, calm, and collected point.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Make a note of your 5 biggest takeaways. You had, I'm sure, lots of takeaways during this long session. Of course, you need to discuss those takeaways with your coach. In the live coaching session, you're expected to explain your takeaways and summarize the content of this lecture. If you have any doubts, they will take care of it. So with that, thank you very much. This was it was a very long class, but we covered two big parts of what is important in your communication skills at a more advanced levels, what you need to do. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're going to take away a lot from this thing. And like I said at the start, these two things are so important to a person's career that even if you take a few points from this thing and start using them, you can see huge benefits from it. Okay, so bye bye, see you soon.